What would be an alternative to Me Too?
So I would try to move towards a patriarchal system where women were slowly phased out of the workplace altogether, and then that solves this problem.
How would we survive and live?
The same way that we survived and lived for most of our history, which
Yeah,
is
but that
without
didn't work
women
because
inside
men
the
would
workforce.
abandon their homes to go to other women. What the first divorce case was because the guy ditched his wife and his kids and went to be with another woman.
Which has what to do with
I'm
anything?
a widow.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what would I do?
What does it have to do with anything?
It has to do with everything. How
But
are
what does
women
it
going
have
to
to do with
survive?
it?
How will they survive if they're
The
not
same
working?
way that they've always survived without women in the workforce. There was not
How?
a problem with the survival before women were in
Well,
the workforce.
how did it
There
happen
won't
before
be
then?
a
Just say that.
problem
How
with
did-
survival post.
No.
Women are enabled to be in the workforce only through the usage of technology.
Wait,
If you
no,
look at
wait,
the
don't do this diatribe. Answer the question. How would a woman, let's say a woman gets
Right.
widowed, how does she survive?
She would probably remarry.
Why would you want to
but not only
why-
that, the assets of the husband always have traditionally gone to the woman. Not only that, there's usually an obligation from the family of the person you were widowed from.
That's
who's going
assuming
to
the
help
man
you
was
out.
doing everything right. Like the man was just working hard all the time, saving money, that he had assets.
We can't assess all of society
But
just
that's
based
how it
on
is
the
now.
what if risks of what if a meteorite strikes you.
How
That's
many
not
men do you
fair.
think right
and I'm
now-
sorry. Hang on, let me finish, lady. I'm sorry that a fucking meteorite might strike your husband and he might die, but we're not going to make a societal prescription based on that. That would be insanity. So
But that's
yes, there's going to
common.
be some unfairness baked in, but we can't unfortunately alleviate all unfairness from every situation over all times.
Isn't
We
it
can't do
common
that.
right now that like the average savings rate is like negative for like people under 35? So basically every widow under the age of like 35 or 40.
First of all, they're not. If you were to reduce the women's participation in the workforce, you would see a massive increase in salary, more than likely for men. That follows. In fact,
No, it doesn't follow. It literally
How
is.
does it not?
No,
It
that
doesn't
is
follow
true.
because the
Before-
number one indicator of like countries becoming prosperous and successful is women entering the workforce and starting to own businesses. It's like one of the biggest indicators of it.
He's
Destiny,
talking about
you're,
like
you're
$1
familiar.
trillion
You're familiar with
is the-
supply and demand, right?
Yep.
If you have less workers, do you have more of a supply of workers? Or
You
less of a
understand that
supply?
when you go to high
My
school.
question, like I just answered.
No,
yours.
I'll answer your question. The
Then just say
supply and
yes.
demand X graph is an incredibly crude and simplistic way to analyze markets. Yes, of course, if you remove all the women from the workforce, the men will get higher wages.
Then
However,
why did
you've
fuck
also
did you
got
just
to
argue they wouldn't?
what?
Why did you just argue they
Because
wouldn't?
every single economist in the world agrees with me and not you, Andrew. So maybe there's
Agrees
a better
with you about what?
Agrees
You
with
just
me that
agreed
when
with
women
me.
start to own businesses and enter the workforce, is one of the highest
Bro,
predictors.
You just agreed with me and my position that if all women were exited from the workforce tomorrow, salaries for men would skyrocket. You
We'd also
literally
have
just
Sal-
$1
agreed with
salaries-
that.
trillion
wait,
less
salaries-
dollars
yeah.
in our economy. since
Salaries might increase, Andrew. Do you think murdering half the U.S. population would be good for the economy? Because now you've got half the
That's
workforce.
a red.
What happens to
that-
productivity?
So,
Like, what happens to the
So hang on. So
productivity as well?
phasing women out, for one thing, there's a massive distinction between that and murdering half the population. But assuming that we granted your hypothetical and half the population was somehow murdered, salaries would still increase for the half that were here. Yes,
No,
Destiny.
that's
And what
not.
would
That's
happen
just
to
not how it
productivity?
works. There's no.
Yes,
one-
that-
you,
you-
you will
did you
not
just
find-
get done saying
you will-
that's
no,
how it
I
works?
didn't get done saying. You're using a high school supply demand graph to analyze an entire worker economy. Workers are a supply in the economy. Generally, for an economy, when you increase your supplies, you increase the standards of living, you increase the GDP, you increase wages across the board. Here's a question, Andrew. If we looked, if
So
we
you
went
just
to-
agreed with me again.
No, I didn't agree with
You
you, Andrew.
did.
I agree with you that the very crude supply demand graph might seem to support what you're saying, but there's a whole bunch of reasons why a crude supply and demand graph would never explain in something entirely like wage markets for an entire society. That's absurd.
You just listen. You've agreed with me in every way you possibly can. You just keep deferring
like
to,
a retard.
but there's other complexities which might come in. Okay, fair enough. There might be some other complexities that come in, but men's salaries, if women exited the workforce tomorrow, would increase drastically. There's no way around that.
And then they would decrease. Yes, your consumer base would fall, your overall level of wealth would
Yeah.
fall, your overall, like everything. I'm curious.
Why
if
would
we-
you
You brought in-
consumer base
women
fall.
entering the workforce has brought so much money to the economy when you compare it to like if women were never those changes never happened. So the economy has 100% been benefited by women entering the workforce.
Hold on.
Why?
No, wait. This isn't even up for debate. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's not.
Where are
It's
all of these?
not.
I'm sorry. Answer this. Where are all of these hyper-competitive countries that don't let women in the workforce because they want to be more competitive on the world stage? Can you name like one?
You mean nations which are in the West, they're all egalitarian, and so they've all pushed for this.
I'm going to
However,
restate my question
we
once
can-
you finish your
Yeah, and
rant
I'm
here. Go
answering
ahead.
your question.
You're not answering. Yeah,
we
go
can
ahead.
look at the markers before women entered in the workplace, and we were very prosperous.
First of all, no,
No,
we're
I
not.
think that's
Number
a
one.
decent
Yes, we
point. If you
were.
look
We
at-
were
I'm
very
asking you,
prosperous.
where are the countries that are outcompeting everybody else because they're like, we're not going to let our women enter the workforce because it's better for our country? Give me one.
Yeah, so for
Okay,
instance, like China,
again, you're
Wait,
making,
Lauren,
you're
let
making.
Andrew answer, and then we'll
Yeah.
go to you. Go ahead.
Listen, there's a distinction to be made here.
You're not going to
that
answer. You
Even
don't have
if
an
I
answer.
can't,
No, you're rambling. Where's
So
Lauren
I'm
at? What was
telling
her
you,
answer?
telling you the
you're not.
truth.
You have no
right
answer
now,
because
in
you're.
current,
says
right now,
we're adding
current
trillions
in
to the
existence in
economy.
the West. No, I couldn't point to one because of egalitarianism. But I can still use the historic marker to show that those same nations, before women entered the workforce in mass, were quite prosperous.
Sorry.
I think it's
That
like
doesn't
a
answer his
decent
question
point
still.
that if
How did
it's a
that not
decent
answer your
point-
question?
Because he asked you for an example of a country today that exists today.
All Western nations
You
were
can't. I'm trying to
prosperous
compare
even
life
before
to life.
women
You can't
entered
go
the
back
workforce.
in time.
All
You're
of
giving
it.
me the argument that like women entering the workforce is like in like. I don't know, has made it so reality TV has appeared. You're just correlating two things that aren't necessarily related to each other. The way that you would study this in econ is you wouldn't go, what was it like 500 years ago, and now let's compare it today. You would compare one country to other countries, and you would say,
In
oh,
econ,
well,
you wouldn't look at the historic standards. I think
no, you would never look. No, you don't look at. That's why when you do any
You
econ
don't look at
research,
historic standards?
No. Open the NDR. Open any econ study ever. You don't say like, oh well, 50 years ago, what was it like? Let's see how this. Like for instance, when you do minimum wage experiments, you go state by state. You pick placebo cities. You compare.
So
like,
when a
you compare-
Keynesian economist,
I don't know
so
what
it
you
goes
mean
to
by
the-
Keynesian
goes to-
economist, bro. I don't
if a
have. I
Keynesian-
don't have the political
if
terms.
a
I'm just talking about the
Keynesian-
research.
Hang on,
Research.
stop. Whatever economist you want, but I'll just say Keynesian. If a Keynesian economist goes in and to a government position and he wants to offer economic solutions, wouldn't he appeal to Keynes? And Keynes markets and solutions, and those
No
market
economist
solutions
goes
are
up
going
to
to
a
be based
policymaker. No,
on
they don't.
those standards
No,
from that.
No,
What do you
no,
mean?
you don't go up to a guy and you go, hey, what about Keynes? Hey, what about the 1950s?
You do.
No, you.
No.
Okay.
Well, first
For
of all,
economics, of course
No,
you do.
you
I'll,
don't.
I'll even,
No,
I'll
you
even grant
don't.
you that. But they would highlight examples of, hey, this country implemented Keynesian economics or economic policies, and then this is how it played out, as opposed
No,
to
we
well,
don't use a historic standard, remember? Destiny just
No,
said you don't
no,
ever
that-
look at a historic
that is
standard
exa-
when
no,
it comes to the
because
economy.
that
It's
is
the most,
exactly what
that is
Destiny
the
is asking
dumbest
for.
single
She's asking
thing
for
I have ever heard in my life, by the way.
policy that
Andrew.
banned women from the
I have
workforce.
never heard
And that
anything
resulted
that
in
stupid
increase in GDP.
in my life. Now,
Andrew,
I want to
let's
ask you,
let Lauren
Corey.
talk.
Do you think that it's unwise to look at historic standards when you're making economic policy, Corey?
Across the board, universally, no, there are some lessons to be learned from history, but to Destiny's point, like making economic policy today, generally speaking, is driven by data generated today and looking at other policies.
Yes,
that
but
other
you're
countries
still
do.
looking at a historic standard and you're comparing the data. That way you know which is good and which is bad policy.
Can you give me an example of a major
how can
policy
you make
decision or
a
a
policy
single
for the
piece of
future
econ
with-
research that's looking back to the 1950s for modern day insight into how we should be doing government policy?
Oh yeah, well that's done all the time, of course.
Oh, then you should be
Of
able to name
course.
one time it's done.
Yeah, well I can send over tons of data that goes over
Name
100
one. You
years
just said it's
of
done all the
economic
time. You don't
policy.
have one off the top
I
of your
just
head?
did. Yeah, Keynesian economics.
That's not a
Austrian
study. That's not a
economics.
policy. That's not anything.
No, hang on. The Keynesian economics is our current policy.
You're fuck. Oh God, why am I getting baited by this? I'm sorry. I'm okay.
Keynesian economics is our
Can I
current
just
policy.
say one thing really
Remember when
quick?
Greenspan was like Keynesian economics? That's why we're gonna raise the rates. That's why. Yeah, like get
Hang
killed,
on.
bro.
I promise Lauren can talk. Let her talk, and then we'll.
Yeah,
move on to
so-
the topic.
Okay, Andrew, I agree with you a lot in this debate. However, with Destiny's point, why, for instance, wouldn't China like force all of the women to stay at home and then have all of the men be in the workforce if truly that was what created the most prosperous?
One of the biggest problems right now is a labor shortage. It's actually due to a lack of human beings.
Wait, but
I
isn't a
wouldn't
labor
we-
shortage good because it increases wages,
Oh,
Andrew?
I'm trying. Let me finish.
Yeah, tell us.
Okay.
Remember the supply-demand graph.
No, it has not increased wages. Wages have essentially been stagnant. There
Yes.
hasn't been much in the
That's
way of wage
true.
increases at all, Destiny.
Because of women,
Wait, no,
and
wait,
I
hold on,
think
wait,
that's a lot
explain
of
it.
it because of women in the workforce.
There's a
actually.
labor
So I
shortage,
think
though,
that is
Andrew.
the issue
Less
with
workers.
women in the workforce.
What's
If you
that?
have more people in the workforce,
Yes,
you
it's
have
for.
women-
Hang on. Yes, Destiny. Wait a second. And since the labor shortage, that was basically the first time in my entire lifetime, probably yours too, where people could actually go in and begin to negotiate salaries because of this shortage. Yes, Destiny.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's,
Do you
okay, so
get
then
it now,
that's
Destiny?
good. Okay,
Yeah.
you proved, yes, you proved with your point. So then answer Lauren's question. Why doesn't China say,
I
hey,
did.
Oh, so okay, what was the answer? I missed
So,
it.
no, you need to concede. So
why
concede on
doesn't
this
China?
point.
Why doesn't China tell women stay home from work?
First, back up and concede to the point
I'm
that
not
I was
conceding
correct.
anything to you because your
So
understanding of econ is like
so
juvenile.
wages haven't been stagnant due to women in the workforce, even though you just said
No,
that.
they
You won't
haven't been
concede that
stagnant.
point?
Again, women in the workforce have increased the productivity and increased the real wages and increased every level of economic success, every indicator in every country around the world. That's why, to Lauren's question, why doesn't China tell women to stay home from work?
At this point, there is again a worker shortage, which is going on.
He's not answering the question. He has
globally.
no answer.
It's
It's
that is the
intentional.
answer.
It's like a debate tactic, literally.
No, how is that not an answer?
Because I'm asking
Andrew,
you, why
are
doesn't
you
China
saying
say?
that- are you- wait,
why
let-
doesn't
let-
China?
let me-
or sorry.
Let me see if I can bridge that gap. Andrew, are you saying that the reason that China doesn't tell women to stay at home is because there's a labor shortage? They don't have enough labor force to do that.
This is right now. This is a global phenomenon.
Look at him rambling.
This has to do with the fact that China had a one-child policy, and it's the same thing with our fertility rates here. We can't keep up with the supply right now. We can't. We just can't do it because you have the essentially the 18 to 30-year-olds are going to subsidize the
He's still
generation
not gonna
before
answer. He has no answer
and the
for this.
4 generations after. And so you need this pool, but we're now entering into this section where you have this pool, which subsidizes all these generations, is so small that you have a huge labor shortage across the board.
If we have a huge
Andrew,
labor shortage, why would getting rid of women from labor markets be good?
Hang on. I'm going to bridge the gap. I'll rephrase the question because I do see your point. Well, what about if we take a country like India, right? They have insane amounts of people being born. Why would they, like following Destiny's logic, why would they not just exclude women
Lauren's
from the workforce?
logic. Thank you very much.
Or Lauren's logic.
I mean, India's caste system does often exclude women, and some of the Muslim
Oh my
nations
God.
often do exclude women. So I don't know what you're talking about. In this case, we're talking about a Western phenomenon. We have entered into a labor
China
shortage
is the West.
because of
Japan
I'm
is the
talking about-
West. Korea is the
I'm
West.
Giving you, I'm
Wait,
giving you a
Destiny, let him
plot.
answer. Let
And
him
by the
answer.
way, yes, South Korea is completely Westernized, 100%. Do you disagree, Destiny?
I don't know what your definition of westernized is.
They listen to they're basically a U.S. port at this point.
I don't know what that means, but okay.
Okay, they're basically, I mean, we run South Korea. South Korea is a massive American port. Our culture has definitely, since the Korean War, reframed South Korea. It's basically, it might as well just be like an extension of an American state at this point.
Andrew's right about that, but let's let him answer the initial
No, I want
question.
Destiny to answer to this. Would you agree that that's true?
I'm not answering until you answer the China question. You haven't answered it. You're not going
You
to.
just made a claim. You said, what about South Korea? Is that the West?
Notice how
Well,
you're
yeah,
weaseling
kinda.
away. I made this claim because you said only Western countries do this, but countries around the
No,
world
I'm
have
not
added women
saying
to the
just
workforce.
the West. I was just
so then
giving you a
I'll ask the
reflection
question
of
one more
the
time so the audience can hear you evade it. If you said that removing women from the workplace was good, why doesn't China just order it to happen because it would be good for the country?
Well, like I said, at the moment, China is dealing with a problem which happened from their one-child policy. They're dealing with a labor shortage as well because this key demographic that
He's
they
not
rely
answering.
on.
All right.
How is this not an answer?
Because
No, Destiny, to be
you're
fair,
saying
he
there's
is
a labor
answering-
shortage,
he's
so they're not going to
answering the
get
question.
what?
He's answering the
No,
question.
hold on,
He
Alex. He's not. He's saying there's a labor shortage, so they don't want to get women off of the workplace. What do you think would happen in the United States if we axed 50% of our workforce when our unemployment is at like 3.25%?
Didn't say that you should axe it tomorrow.
The argument
I had a
he's making
plan
is
to
because of the
gradually
one-child
phase
policy.
women out so that women were more comfortable staying at home than in work. And so this way we could try to get our population back up.
Gotcha.
because
Well,
it's
when you're bored, when
completely
you've moved
devastating.
when you've moved off of day one supply and demand graphs, go look up like the lump of labor fallacy, or literally any other type of reading you can do in econ to show how stupid this point is. But
What is the lump of labor fallacy?
the idea that
Tell
there's like
me.
a fixed amount of work in the economy, and if we have too many people working, we're going to run out of work for everybody to do, Andrew? That's not true. Like, I'm pretty sure there's literally a famous quote where it's like 95% of stupid econ ideas start with this idea that there's a limited amount of goods and services for everybody available. This is not true.
All right, guys.
Like-
1 minute warning. I've let this run way long because it's entertaining. I'll give you guys another minute to duel it out, and then we'll move on to the next topic.